was in a trainer with a Cub. I had a student with me, and of course I wasn't supposed to have a student with me. I crashed in the field. Farmer was plowing in the field. He picked me up in a wagon. I was sent to the Naval Hospital, and I was pronounced dead on arrival. And they rolled me off in a room, put a sheet over my head, and my arm was out from under the sheet. And a doctor, he picked up my hand and fell apart. So he had ordered an immediate blood transfusion. I was unconscious 3 days. I spent 3 months in the hospital.
If it weren't for a young naval doctor in Florida, the dream of Hill Aircraft would have crashed with Guy Hill Sr. in 1942.
A friend introduced me to Guy Hill Sr. and we dated, first flying somewhere and then going to a movie or church. One day we landed in a pasture in Fulton County, and Guy said to me, "One day this will be an airport," and this is the spot that became Fulton County Airport.
A man of ethics, Guy Hill Sr. worked hard and measured his success by his accomplishments. He liked working with his hands, whether it was starting a new business, serving in the Georgia legislature, or patching a roof in 95-degree weather at the age of 78. Guy Hill was not afraid to put in sweat equity. To be clear, however, his mantra to his children was, "It's not worth spending almost 2/3 of your waking life doing something that you don't love. Make sure that you enjoy your work," and that he did.
I was renting space from Bar Powell, and I got word that Gene Barker wanted to sell the operation, and this was in '55. So I called him. I said, "I understand you want to sell it." He said, "That's exactly right." And I said, "I got an interest." I made a point with him, took off to Shanley, and we made a deal.
Beg, borrow, or trade, it had to be his, and so it was. 50 years ago, living on our savings, we bought the operation and named it Hill Aircraft.
Yeah, my first memories are coming out to Hill Aircraft with my father on Saturdays and painting and fixing up and working on the hangar and all that kind of stuff. And there was another one of the airplane pilots' sons that flew for national parks. Tug Kangas was his name, and he and I would be all over the airport on Saturdays. Tug would bring his son, and he and I would be, on the other side of the airport, on the end of the runway. The airport manager would constantly call Dad up and say, "Well, your son's down at the end of the runway again. You need to go get him."
Guy Hill Sr. ran Hill Aircraft as a business, but treated everyone like family.
I'd like to mention that not only did I learn to fly out here, but my wife learned to fly, and my oldest son, Trey, learned to fly. And they're both instrument rated, multi-engine rated, and it's kind of like a little flying family. It's a great place to be. You just don't find that anywhere else.
Well, I know when I was getting my instrument rating, Mr. Hill would always walk to the bottom of the steps and say, "You just keep going. The sky's the limit. Keep flying." So, just so encouraging, such a nice person.
Well, he was an honest, conscientious individual. He did business on a business-like basis. The only thing I can say is he was a wonderful friend. I'm going to miss him.
He always kept his word. Everything he ever said, he lived up to his commitment. We never had a cross word in all the years that I knew him. Hill Aircraft, all their people, were nothing but courteous. Never done business with anybody any more honorable or nicer. Everything he said, he kept his word. Every commitment he made, he kept it.
Never to be sold for gold or silver, Hill Aircraft was as much a part of Mr. Hill as his family was, and worked toward the dream that someday he could pass it on.
I had always hoped that it would be a family business and it would go on after I departed. They have to make that decision for themselves.
I'll tell you about how I got to Hill Aircraft. Carol came home from a trip to New York, and she'd leave her car at her mom and dad's when she would go. And she comes home to North Georgia, where we lived at the time, and she said, Dad wants you to call him. What'd I do? Oh, I don't think he did anything. He just wants you to call him. So I called him. And he asked me when I was going to be in Atlanta again, and I told him, and so I came. He asked me to come by and see him, so I came by to see him. We were just chatting, you know, and he said, and I need some help. And I thought he wanted me to come down one weekend, like help him clean out a tea hanger or something. And I said, well, I'll help you. I'll give you some help. What you want to do? So then after about 10 or 15 minutes of him explaining, I started to get the picture that he wanted somebody to come to work with him and help him. Well, I told him, I said, I think I'd like to give this a try. But I said, I don't know anything about an airplane. I said, the only thing I know about an airplane is I would probably stay away from that thing in the front that goes around and around, because that looks like a big lawnmower blade, you know, and that's about all I know. And he said, oh, I can teach you airplanes. That's not a problem. I couldn't quit, and he couldn't fire me for a year. And at the end of a year, we would sit down and talk about it and see how it was going. And that was, September will be 24 years ago. So I guess it worked out.
Started working summers and vacations in maintenance, cleaning floors, cleaning up oil spots, and anything else that needed to be done on the floor-wise for 50 cents an hour. And then about 2 summers later, I got a big raise to $2 an hour and started doing kind of mechanics apprentice type stuff.
I remember working behind the desk. I think everybody had their turn working behind the desk, sharing more than anybody. But, you know, it was a summer job, and we enjoyed doing it. But you heard all the gossip behind that desk, anything and everything. But I remember one particular airplane that I'll just not ever forget. A customer was Litchfield Construction Company. And it's when I was just learning the phonetic alphabet. And they had a big Convair. It was a huge, big airplane. And because it was Litchfield Construction, people often use that in their N number. And it was 555 LC. And they called it Triple Nickel Lima Charlie. And when I learned that, it was like, ooh, I got airport lingo. You know, it was Triple Nickel Lima Charlie.
Well, when you work there, you have to wear a lot of hats. Yeah, and over the years, I wore a lot of hats, charter and customer service. I worked in avionics for a while, in maintenance. I think Dad initially wanted me to work in every department so that I could kind of get a feel for what everybody was doing, and not that I was supposed to spy on them or anything, but so it was very interesting. And once you've worked in all the departments, you have empathy for everybody, and you sort of understand where they're coming from. I think I was in customer service the longest, but I was there summers and holidays. Growing up, I started when I was 13. Did you guys start that early?
I think so.
It was a little hard to be taken seriously at 13, but
yeah.
My dad, on the weekends, when we'd come out to the airport, you know, he would always say, you need to hurry up and learn the business so you can take over. And you need to hurry up and learn the business so you can take over. After I came to work, graduated from Auburn and came to work in 88, about 90, 91 there, something like that, my dad called me down in his office and said, come down here, I want to talk to you a minute. And usually that meant something was wrong, and there was, you know, he wanted to talk to you about it. So the whole way I'm walking down the hall, I'm trying to figure out, all right, what, you know, is there something that I'm not remembering that I did wrong that he's going to, you know, fuss at me about or whatever. And I came in, he said, sit down here a minute. And he kind of stopped and looked out the window for what seemed like, you know, an eternity. And he kind of turns to me and looks, and he says, you know, I never really asked you if this is what you wanted to do. I just kind of expected you to come to work, you know. And he kind of sat and thought a little bit more and said, so is this what you want to do? You know, because I could tell he was just really anguishing over this question as to what my answer was going to be. And, you know, I looked right back and said, absolutely, this is what I've always wanted to do. Didn't want to do anything else.
I want to congratulate the younger generation of our family who have had a part in the new Hill Aircraft. I'm just completely amazed at what they have accomplished in making the company what it is today. My thanks and appreciation, honor, and love to all of them.
We had the good fortune of being able to, when the kids were growing up, in the summertime we'd get in an airplane and we'd go from Maine to California.
Vacations were a blast. The girls in their hair dryers, plus luggage. Guys saying, cut down on the luggage, we'll crash if we're overloaded. But you can't explain that to 4 teenage girls and a wife who love to fly.
We were flying to Florida like we did every year for a vacation. And the weather was kind of yucky. It was kind of a low ceiling. And we flew down to Florida at 1,800 feet. Which is kind of unheard of. We were below the cloud layer, and we're dodging antennas all the way down there. And I never could figure out why we flew at 1,800 feet. But it finally turned out later on that Dad never got an instrument rating. When he got out of the war, there wasn't an instrument rating when he got out of the war, and he just never got one. He just flew in the clouds and wasn't an issue. Well, when they came out with the instrument rating, he just decided he'd stop flying in the clouds as opposed to going back and getting an instrument rating.
No kidding.
And I can see him with his aviator sunglasses on, and he was always chewing gum, like Wrigley's spearmint gum, with his aviators on, and he'd have the maps spread out all across the cockpit. I mean, he didn't know where he was going when we set out.
Really. And I can remember getting a letter from Pat. She was working out there, and I had done a study abroad program in Spain. And the letter, you're not going to believe who flew into Hill Aircraft today. The Beatles. And I got to see them.
7 years into the business, tragedy strikes. Taped switches in the utility box of a rented section of the Hill Aircraft hangar sparked a fire that almost put Guy Hill out of business.
That hangar burnt in 1962. I had a radio shop and an engine shop, and we didn't have a nickel's worth of insurance. Just almost put out of business. I didn't get along with the airport manager, but he called me about 2 o'clock in the morning and said, I thought I'd better call you, your hangar's on fire. And of course, I came out here, and when I came out here, the whole top of that hangar was red hot.
I remember the phone call in the middle of the night. Yeah, Sharon and Butch may not remember that, but I remember being awakened, and of course you couldn't go back to sleep because all we got was a phone call that the hangar was on fire. So Daddy left in the middle of the night, and Mom had to stay, with us.
I remember the hangar burning, and my airplane was in there, and the wings got so hot that they drooped down, and it was in a heck of a mess.
But we just knuckled down. We didn't give up. And I just worked night and day, 7 days a week.
A true pioneer in Georgia aviation, Guy Hill Sr. coordinated and hosted one of the state's first air shows, bringing together the best, newest, and most fascinating aspects of the industry on that day. The air show attracted more than 15,000 spectators.
Guy Hill put on an air show, and it says here August 13th, 14th of 1977. And it was a big-time show that he put on at Fulton County Airport. And Arthur Godfrey was here. You can go through it, and it's got them, I guess they're all listed, but Arthur Godfrey and I assume Bob Hoover and all of the big-time aviation people. This is my father. Guy Hill and I are competitors, and yet he puts my father on the front of his program at his air show. And but Daddy had the first airplane in Georgia in 1907, and that's what Guy has done, is the history of aviation in Atlanta.
he leased a Cherokee 6 to a guy that supposedly was hauling band equipment in. And the airplane turned up down in Mexico City with all the seats out of it. So the Mexican authorities confiscated the airplane. And they kept it about 2 years. And the State Department called and said they're going to release your airplane. So he got on an airliner, a smoker as he called it, and he went to Mexico City. And
he went down to get it, and of course they wouldn't let him have it.
And he talked them into letting him do an annual on the airplane while they were getting all the paperwork ready. So he did an inspection on the airplane, got it running, got it going good. Then they decided they wasn't going to let him have his airplane again.
He was going to test the airplane, see if the engine was running good, and I mean, guys, it's a whale of a story as far as I'm concerned.
And just about sunset, he gave the guard $100 and asked him if he could find something else to do.
He cranks up and takes off and leave the Mexicans, and he heads for the U.S. border, and he got back, and I mean, and in fact, he stole his own airplane. And
my being able to survive is because I could do it all. I could work on the airplane, I could fly the airplane, I could work with the bankers, I could work with the politicians, I could just do it all. I just had so many hats to wear, and I just learned to do it all, taking advantage of every little opportunity to come along. We've been here 42 years, we must have done something right.
Guy Hill Sr. built Hill Aircraft on integrity, professionalism, diplomacy, and heart. Not a man to be reckoned with, but fair and just. He was recognized by his family, peers, employees, and the citizens of Georgia as a leader and role model.
Most of the men that flew during World War II, which is what Daddy did, and then later got into aviation, whether it was through the military or private aviation, they were adventurers. They were pioneers.
He just did a good job over there, and so I got great respect for him and being able to hold on and do what he's done.
He was involved in almost every plane I've owned, and I think I had 12 at one, not at one time, 3 at one time. I enjoyed doing business with Guy. He made some very good deals for me. We went up to Asher Edelman, the Wall Street corporate raider, sold a Jetstar. And Guy went up to New England with me to look at it, to advise me on it. And I bought the airplane. And it turned out to be just wonderful. As a matter of fact, I sold it a couple of years later and made $1 million on it.
Hill Aircraft has always been very blessed with people. We've had some great people. Neil Daniel, for example. Neil was working the line when I came in '81, and he's still here today. Kenny was the first guy that I hired. He's still with us. Jerry was probably the third or fourth guy that I hired. He's still with us. So we've been very fortunate all these years with good people.
Now, Guy was opinionated. You've heard that? He had strong feelings, and of course a Republican. He had to be strong to survive on that airport over there. Guy Jr. and Larry Westbrook, both of them have been, of course, very active in the business and very supportive of the industry. So,
if this is all possible, I want it to continue. I have no interest in selling the business. I'm in the process of giving the business to my children, and I hope that they'll have the same goals that I've had, is to continue to let the business be an asset to the family.
Guy Sr. would be so proud of their accomplishments, far and above his expectation. To know they didn't turn tail and run, but stayed on and made his dreams a reality. May Hill Aircraft be here another 50 years.
I wish Hill Aircraft the next 50 years to be as fruitful and as wonderful as the last 50. And I'm sure that in 50 years from now, there will be a running Hill aircraft.
You want to bump with me?
Sure, I'll go up with you. I'll fly with you anytime, buddy.
Okay.
Okay.
It's a date.